Looking at, looking at the Module 5 study questions, Module 5 is just the reading of Donald Gustafson's essay Grief, which is, challenging, long essay. I confine my study questions to what I think is the very most essential parts of it. Number one, Gustafson's first example of a definition of grief appears on page 458, quote, "As a first approximation, grief might be something like a deep unhappiness, essentially tied to a belief or judgment that someone has died." How does this definition differ from Gustafson's definition G? Okay, so, I have to be a little subtle about this. He starts out with a definition of grief, which he rejects, and then shows why his own definition G is better. That's what he's trying to do, at least. How does this one that he starts with, which again is not the one that he ends with, how does it differ from the one that he does end with? Well, the big difference is that there's a third element that's added to the two from the initial definition. And the third element is the so-called conative or desire element. The first one is a very reasonable idea at first. I mean, not at first, a very reasonable idea that, well, what's grief? Well, grief is a unhappiness tied to the belief that someone has died. And the big, really interesting thing that he adds to that in the essay, in his own definition, G, is that it's those two things, but with a deep-seated desire that person still be alive. So Gustafson's definition, G, has three elements: the belief element that someone has died, the feeling element, which is sorrow or unhappiness, or, bad feelings in general, and then the desire or conative element, that there has to be a desire, a real active desire that person not be dead, that person be alive. Number two, what does Gustafson mean by a belief contrary desire? It just means that a desire which is contrary to belief, that is, a desire which, according to what you know about the world, cannot be fulfilled. If I have a deep-seated desire to play center for the Los Angeles Lakers, that is a belief contrary desire, because I know that I do not have the skills necessary to do that. Of course, the belief contrary desire in G, the definition G, is the desire that the person who is dead be alive, which is even more unsatisfiable than my supposed desire to play center for the Lakers. Number three, much of Gustafson's point depends on there being a real distinction between desire and wish. What is this purported distinction? And do you yourself think that there is a difference between desiring something and wishing for something? It's a tough question there. What is the distinction between desire and wish? Desire is different from wish, I think, in the clearest sense for Gustafson, insofar as if our desires are in conflict with our beliefs, then we are in an irrational state. However, if our wishes are in conflict with our beliefs, then we are not in an irrational state. Meaning, if I know that Joe is dead and I desire that Joe be alive, I am in an irrational state. But if I know that I can't fly like Superman, but I really wish I could, I'm not in an irrational state. And that, I think, is the biggest difference. But then you can ask why. Well, because desire is more deep-seated than wish. We can wish for anything we like. We can have idle wishes. We can wish for things that we know can't be true, but they don't put us in an irrational state because, well, that would be begging the question. Desires do put us in an irrational state, according to Gustafson, if they conflict with what we know to be possible. One of the reasons for that is that desires are action prompting. Desires are of a nature that they prompt me. They consistently move me to do something to fulfill that desire, where wishes don't. I wish I could fly like Superman, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to go into my workshop and try to come up with some Superman flying solution. Whereas if I really desire something, that means that it's natural for me to do something to fulfill the desire, which is not true in the case of wishes. And then I ask you whether you think that there really is a difference, that's really up to you. I mean, it's a big thing because if you don't think there's a real difference between desire and wish, then you probably don't put a lot of faith, or you don't have put a lot of credence in Gustafson's theory.